Thank you for the kind invitation to speak at this summit. Always like a chance to sound off, so thanks for the opportunity. That's not a spelling mistake, as I'll explain in a moment. It all will become clear. So, what am I going to be talking about? Well, I really wanted to get to the heart of the sort of issues that concern me as a CEO working in, obviously, the conveyancing space. I know that there are people here from the residential side. My background, I'm a commercial lawyer. I was at Allen & Overy before I ever went into conveyancing, and I worked in legal tech. So I hope that some of the things I say will cut across the difference between residential and commercial property. But for me, I think one of the things I find hard, and I don't know if that's the same as your experience, but what I find really hard is that how do we get certainty for the strategic decisions we're making running our law firms at the moment in terms of staffing, when there is staffing and strategy and tech, when there is so much uncertainty about how these tools, how these technologies are likely to impact what we do. In the conveyancing world, there's a lot of talk about AI and blockchain, ChatGPT, etc. A lot of talk at the moment about upfront information. A lot of the lawyers in this world are probably thinking, what kind of job am I going to have, 5 years from now? Is this going to be a completely end-to-end digital process, for example? And these are the things I want to sort of engage with here and just give you a view of how I see it in the residential conveyancing context. But I hope some of this is of more general application. So in other words, how do we get a grip on where conveyancing is going? I'm going to start with a quiz, actually. It's not the most fun quiz. Should have been football related, I think. But I'm just going to read this out. And I'm going to ask you, who in the conveyancing world said this? The great difficulties which occur in selling estates and obtaining money on real security, the time which usually elapses before the completion of these transactions, and the harassing expenses and disappointments which attend them are evils universally acknowledged. Does anyone know who said that? I was always taught, stay quiet and someone will break. But it's always me, I break first. So I'm not going to push it. Well, the answer, it was the real property commissioners back in 1830. Now that's interesting, isn't it? When you think that sounds as though that could have been said, if you're in the conveyancing world, that could have been said last week. And for all of this talk about progress in conveyancing, that is 190 years old. And I'm going to come back to the significance of that in a moment. So let's move, I've got to sort of connect it to the main theme somehow, and the Waze book. And I'm sorry, if anyone's expecting me to talk about GPS and satellite navigation, you're going to be disappointed, because it's a very tenuous link. I saw this book, I liked the title, and I thought, this has quite an application to conveyancing, and I'll explain. So as I say, we've got, you may know, I don't know, people use this Waze sat-nav navigation app. It helps you sort of navigate traffic management problems, and this was the guy who invented it. And I thought there was a good application to conveyancing. As I say, that statement I just put up there, 194 years old, so we're talking about 194 years of pain. It makes England football look, relatively good by comparison, doesn't it? 66 and all that. But in conveyancing, we seem to be really fixated with a problem mindset. And it's not in a positive sense. If you get a load of conveyancers together, or you get industry groupings, typically they are going to focus on what's wrong with the process. They're going to be obsessed with what's wrong with the process. And when you start investigating this, because this is very important to how we solve this so-called problem in conveyancing, you ask yourself, well, what exactly is the problem in conveyancing? I've just given you a quote. It's been going on for 200 years, and we haven't really moved it significantly on in terms of the frustrations that people have. And obviously, if you think about it, is it about speed of process? It's still something like 22 weeks is the national average time. It sounds terrible. It sounds a scandalous amount of time. But of course, some people are not bothered about how quickly the process goes. Some people don't want to move house quickly. And in many respects, the problem in conveyancing is it's connected with life. It's connected with this incredibly difficult life event of moving house. When you think about how complicated, depending on where you are in your house moving experience, but the idea of sorting all the stuff out that you've got at home, emptying the attic or other parts of the house, it's a difficult event. So we talk a lot about upfront information in conveyancing as though there was this way of making the process really, really easy by bringing a lot of stuff up front. But of course, that itself is not easy. It's like the idea of upfront packing. If you're moving house, can you imagine the idea that you could do everything up front and pack everything? People wouldn't do it. So my point is that conveyancing's problems or conveyancing's complexity is really connected with a life issue. It's not something that necessarily is going to get solved by technology, and I'm going to come on and give some examples in a moment. But maybe the point I'm trying to make here is that this guy who wrote this book, he said, well, let's stop seeing the problem in such negative terms. Let's not just focus only on solutions. Because I guess if you looked at traffic issues, one way that you try and solve that would just be build more roads or build underpasses. And he didn't look at it that way. He said, I'm not going to try and change anything about traffic. I'm not going to change the fact that we have traffic jams. I'm just going to give people more information so they can navigate the problem more effectively. And I guess the question is, what's the similar example we could give in conveyancing? Because we're also fixated with solving the problem of conveyancing, not getting this idea of falling in love with the problem and finding how we can get novel solutions on the back of that. But to get to the sort of point, what's my central argument? Well, my argument is that conveyancing, if it has problems, it's not, they are problems related partly with life. It's a messy and fraught process because it's a big life event that people are dealing with. There is no magic wand that is going to allow people to move at the push of a button. It's always going to be more complicated than that. But there may be some pain relief that's coming from some of the technological interventions that we're beginning to see. And that's what I want to focus on. So, and this, I hope, is of application beyond conveyancing. If you wanted to sit back and look at your area, and I think this could apply in commercial property as well as conveyancing. This old framework, it's not that old, it's from 2018 from Deloitte, when they did a review of conveyancing in Australia. And essentially, to make it simple, there's just two axes, and one measures how digital the process has become, and the other measures whether the process has been, as it were, embedded back in the property market in some form or other. So, to give you an example, let's say someone like Rightmove, just to take an example, or Zoopla, decided that they would take over the process of conveyancing. That would be an example of something up in the top three corner there. The idea that conveyancing and the legal process gets absorbed back into the property process. On the other hand, if the process stays as it is now, it stays more like here, where it's professionals continuing to do their thing, and they still operate autonomously. Equally, lenders taking over the process. We often hear a lot of talk about lenders taking over the process. And then the other axis, as I say, is how technologically led is it? So the more we go this way, the more we're getting to the idea of Amazon-style conveyancing, the idea that people will go online and they'll be able to do their own conveyancing, or again, we stay over this side and we stay less technologically enabled. But a lot of people recently have been saying, well, they think that there's a real opportunity for, I mean, you could take the likes of, I gave an example of Rightmove, or lenders like NatWest or others saying, we want to take the process back into our processes. And I think the problem with that, as I say, is that this market is much too complicated for that. It's too fragmented, 4,500 law firms doing conveyancing, 25,000 estate agents, hundreds and hundreds of lenders. The chances of that happening, I think, are very small. And the other thing, of course, is the massive overestimation of what tech will do. I mean, this was the chief of Meta just in May in the Financial Times, just warning people that large language models like ChatGPT, they are still, they've got their limitations. They're incredible. I use ChatGPT every day and I integrate it with my work, but let's be realistic about the applications, particularly in conveyancing. Maybe more applications in commercial property. I certainly think there's more applications in commercial law, but in residential property, probably quite limited, actually. So again, we have to look at this factor of over-hyping tech. So if we pull those sort of strands together, and I've got to sort of get off the fence, as I say here, and take a view about what does it actually look like going forward. Well, my view is that, and I'm thinking back to that grid, I'm saying two big things in analysing this. One is how technologically led. Secondly, how much is it going to be brought back within the property market, such as the lenders or others. And I think that if you look at that, technology is not going to translate anytime soon into a self-service offering in conveyancing. So the idea that we'll have a kind of Amazon-style people going online, doing their own conveyancing, really unlikely. Don't see that happening at all, and I'll explain why later. What I think we're talking about is a future where we have a technologically enabled process rather than a purely digital one. I say I'll give some examples in a moment. And I think what we've, in my firm, how we've tried to describe this is a sort of technologically assisted, automated process. The idea that we're leveraging things like AI and other technologies, but in order to amplify the efficiency of the human lawyer process. So to ensure there is still great levels of human oversight in the process and decision making, but obviously to leverage technology as part of that. And I think on the second question of is it likely to get absorbed? Is Rightmove going to take over conveyancing? Is a lender going to take over conveyancing? Again, unlikely from our point of view. And there's a lot of talk out there in the market. I mean, there are lots of platforms out there, and everyone's doing interesting things. I mean, Landmark doing some fantastic work. I think the good thing about Landmark is that they're not trying to take over the process. They're just providing guidance and assistance in stages of the process. Whereas you've got people like PEXA, the Australians, who think that the process is something they can actually take over. It's something that they can offer an end-to-end solution right through to financial settlement. So that's the issue, I think. I think those sorts of approaches are unlikely to succeed, the PEXA-style approaches, if they stay on their current strategy. Why do I say all that? Why do I think, because other speakers today might be much more ambitious. I'm giving a terrible impression of myself. Like, I'm not a Luddite. I worked in legal tech my whole life. I don't want people to think that I'm not excited and interested in technology. I'm really interested in it. But I think I see it, and I worked quite closely for years with Richard Susskind. We used to share an office, and we used to have this debate even then. And I always used to say to him, you always give these 10-year predictions, Richard, and no one can remember what you predicted 10 years ago, so it's safe. But I always used to say, I think it's always going to be a mixture. It's going to be technologically enabled, but it's never going to be pure tech replacement. So that's what I call a hybrid model. And the reason I think that that is safe in conveyancing, so any conveyancers here worried about your future, I think it's still fairly safe. Much of the first point, the data, much of the data in the conveyancing process is still very unstructured. You know, much of the stuff that we deal with, and that isn't just the formal stuff, like the stuff that the land registry is responsible for, but it's all the other things, all the things that, if you like, make up the process of conveyancing, like knowing whether someone's going to leave a fridge behind, or all these sort of messy little things that come from dealing with leasehold and management information. It's still a long, long haul for us to see how you get to a totally digitized environment. And that's partly my earlier point about life. It's a messy process. You know, that house represents years and years of decision-making and all sorts of oddities that people have done. Very hard to see how that gets codified. Also, remember that information is often entirely relevant to the individual. So, for example, knowing whether there's a clause in a lease about pets, it doesn't matter to someone who hasn't got a pet, or the same thing with parking spaces. How do you create entirely sort of digitized paths when you're dealing with those sorts of vagaries in information? Generative AI, secondly, I think it poses a bigger challenge for advisory tasks. Now, in conveyancing, interestingly, there isn't a great deal of advice. I may offend certain lawyers here if I say there's not a massive amount of advisory work, but it isn't like other areas of law where you're giving, you know, essentially you're charging by the hour for advisory work. You're doing a lot of checking. You're doing a lot of anomaly finding, essentially, in conveyancing. Whereas generative AI is really good for replacing advisory work. So young junior commercial lawyers in their first 3 years, they go away, they research, they draft contracts. It's exactly the kind of thing you could use ChatGPT for. And then the last couple of things, task variety. Well, yeah, I mean, the amount of different things that the conveyancing process includes, from lead generation through to all of the orchestration that the conveyancers do of bits and pieces of information, tying up exchange and completion dates, dealing with chains, makes it a very difficult process, makes it very difficult to see how you turn this into an entirely end-to-end systemized process. So that's why I say I come to that conclusion. But no room for complacency, because, you know, people would say, well, yeah, it's complicated, but, you know, you can insure for the bits that you can't standardize. So, for example, you could, you know, get an insurance policy for title checking or the advisory elements of the process. But again, I'm not going to go into the detail here, but the economics of that, again, very difficult. Title insurance in the US is probably costing, you know, 20 times the amount of conveyancing here. So I don't think it would fly. And there are some other interesting technologies like document collation, but again, I don't think it changes the essence of the argument that this remains a very hybrid process. And again, yeah, these large language models will get better and better, and will that change it? But again, I don't think it changes the point I'm making about where they apply in the process. So what does that actually, just bringing it together, what does that actually look like for us as a firm, and what do we do? Well, I think the approach we take, and I don't know if this is helpful or whether it's something which applies in the commercial real estate context as well, but I think the way we look at it is we try to ensure that we've got best of breed platforms across the whole range of what we do, right from onboarding through to completion and financial settlement. What we have done, however, is create this idea of what we call a data lake, the idea that we've got a layer of extracted information from our systems that enables us then to do interesting things with that data. The other thing that obviously is very much in the news at the moment in the conveyancing context is this payment synchronization, this idea that we are going to get to a point, that classic problem of conveyancing on a Friday, everyone's chasing to see if the money has arrived, the removal van is out there, and obviously people are saying this is crazy. Why does this continue to happen? And obviously there's a lot now. There are at least 4 or 5 separate initiatives where people are saying you can replace all of that with a proper escrow type system in the financial system. So the money doesn't need to move to the client account of a law firm. It can just be earmarked in the account and stay there until the specific timing of the transaction. Now, the problem for the law firms is they lose interest on client money. So again, there's going to be a battle over that in due course. The other thing I think we might see is firms doing interesting things with ChatGPT. We're certainly looking at the idea of using it to respond to customer inquiries. So the idea that you could have it crawl across your data in relation to your transaction, your case management system, in order to give responses to clients. But again, we don't see a massive application at the heart of the conveyancing process. And then, of course, if that direction continues, I'm sure we'll see firms appointing heads of data science, not something we see in the conveyancing world. But just very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, what that looks like for us, what that looks like for us is that we sort of have our best of breed systems, as I say, that will work through the specific aspects of the conveyancing process. And so I did say we should have Landmark on there and search flow as well, because that's absolutely integral to us. I mean, we couldn't achieve a lot of what we're doing in our innovative products, like our fast product. We use OneSearch, and we achieve a great deal of success from that. But here is the sort of core architecture, as you can see. And then, as I say, we extract data from those core systems to populate things like live dashboards, so that these are used to run the firm. And we've got an incredible array of dashboards, so people can see exactly what the state of the cases is, what their KPI position is. And I think this is really important. And again, Landmark are part of this. Landmark Connect is a great example. But increasingly, I think this is the most important area down here, where firms have got to build for a world where they're interconnecting with these sort of slightly more overarching systems that are beginning to get currency. So we've talked about, PEXA, LMS. Let's say a lender like NatWest decides we're going to mandate the use of one of these systems all the way through the process, right from inception through to the management of the case, through to financial settlement, and also lodgement with the land registry. That isn't impossible. We did the first remortgage, the first digital remortgage, that was with PEXA 2 years ago. And that's what it did. So it can be done. And of course, if that happens, it kind of makes a lot of your own technology a little bit redundant in a sense, because you're on their platform. But I think the world we're moving to, rather than a world where somebody is going to win that battle and end up there being sort of one global provider, as has happened for quite specific reasons in Australia, it's more likely that we build to operate with those environments. So one provider might say, you've got to use this platform. I would be really surprised if any of those platforms can ever get above 5 or 6%, maybe not that, of the conveyancing market. But that's where I say Landmark remains such a strong partner, because they are supporting that model of professional autonomy, the idea that we need help on searches, we need help with market intelligence, we need help throughout the process. So it's an interesting one, but that's my sort of take on the future. Very quickly, because I'm almost done. This is the payment synchronization side of it. It's a horrible slide. I'm not even going to try and go through it. We are actually I think we're the only law firm that's on the Bank of England's payment synchronization working group. It's just one of the initiatives that's going on. And as I said, the whole idea is that this model of moving monies during the transaction, it's going to come to an end at one point. How long it takes, I don't know, but it's going to be replaced by something more like this, where the funds don't need to move. All that happens is there's an earmark placed on the funds, and then the great thing for the customer is you can actually say, your move is going to take place at 2:08 on Friday, and it has to happen. That's actually a big revolution in customer experience for the conveyancing sector. So just drawing it all together and finishing off, as a summary, the positives for our sector are that the hybrid model that I've talked about, that sort of mixture of digital and human processes, looks very safe. So people who are saying, probably tomorrow I'll read that the whole process has been taken over by Amazon or something, but it looks really safe as we go forward. So people who are out there anxious saying, are we 6 months away from online conveyancing, or people going on and doing their conveyancing online, or Rightmove taking over conveyancing? I don't think you need to worry. I think 194 years, as I said, we've been saying this. I suspect similar things will be being said 10 years from now about how the process is working. And that's just life. That's how it is. So lawyers will keep a significant control of this process. Threats. Obviously the big threat, I mean, we talk a lot about Rightmove. If you think about it, Rightmove has massive power in the conveyancing process. Tomorrow, they could mandate whatever they liked. They've got almost total monopoly of people listing and looking for property. But they won't do it, and they won't do it for a variety of reasons, partly to do with competition, partly because of the ecosystem of estate agents that they keep alive. So as I say, I think it's very unlikely that we're going to have anyone from the property sector take over the process. But that, I suppose, is the primary threat. How do we react to it? Well, what I've tried to suggest is that it's really important, even if you're using best-of-breed platforms throughout your process, get control of your data. Make sure that you've got sort of clean versions of your data so that you can do interesting things. That's where competitive advantage is going to come from in our world. It's being able to take something like AI and apply it slightly differently to the way your competitor is using it. That's going to be an important thing. And build your system so you can integrate with third parties, because that's going to be important. And then the future, the process will get slicker. We just gave an example of the financial settlement process. It will get slicker. And all the great things that people are doing in conveyancing technology at the moment will make the process slicker. But I think the real victory in conveyancing is not going to go to people who end up with slick processes. It's very easy, isn't it, to think that that's all that makes for good customer service in conveyancing. Had this example the other day. We went to another one of these very, very large international financial organizations who, again, wants to do something in the conveyancing process. And they think, well, that's it. It's just solved by earmarking, but not thinking, well, how does that feel for a customer when suddenly they go to their bank account and find that 100,000 in their account has been locked and they can't access it? So it's interesting how we neglect the customer experience. What I think will be differentiating for law firms in this area is not the tech. The tech's an important thing in the background, but how do we solve that life problem I was talking about? How do we make the whole process of conveyancing something that doesn't cause the stress that it causes currently for our customers? I think that was it. I'm going to finish on that point. So thank you very much.